I don't think there's been a time in my 23-year career managing money for very wealthy people that I've seen so much excitement around a stock becoming public like we did with SpaceX a couple of weeks ago. And when it comes to SpaceX, many of you called to ask whether or not we will be buying into the initial public offering or the IPO, given all the hype around the company and leading up to its public debut. As a professional investor with my team managing almost $750 million and growing every single day, it's very difficult to not want to jump on the bandwagon when everybody's saying how hot it's going to be, what a great company it's going to be, and how much money everybody's going to make. It's called fear of missing out, and that is such a strong emotion when you're managing money. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, as fiduciaries, we don't have the luxury of doing things based off of emotion and based off of things that somebody else might say, and especially when it comes to the news. So from our perspective, when SpaceX came out, the valuation of this company was staggering. It was roughly about 100 times its actual value, which is an extreme amount for any company. One of the biggest companies today, including NVIDIA, many other companies are not trading anywhere near that kind of a valuation. But at least they have something to back up their valuation, where SpaceX not necessarily has anything to back it up with, except for a future promise of hopefully a better world. So fiduciarily, we could not buy into SpaceX's IPO initially when they came out, especially at a valuation like that, which is going to make it so volatile initially when it comes out, and we had no idea where it was going to go. In other words, we would be gambling with your money, and that's something that we would never, ever do. So I instructed my team to go ahead and wait on buying the stock once it settles down a little bit after the initial public offering. So we went ahead and bought SpaceX a few days ago, roughly at a price of about $160, which is roughly what it came back with. If you track the stock in any way whatsoever, it jumped roughly 40% in the first couple of days. And it seemed like it was just going to take off like a rocket, so to speak. But as things normally do, volatility goes both ways, and the stock came back down just as quickly, where it's now trading at its initial public offering price, which is somewhere around $160 per share. We didn't buy SpaceX at the IPO because we felt that the initial valuation left very little margin of safety. So instead, we waited for the enthusiasm to cool, allowing the stock to retreat to a level where we believed that the long-term risk-reward became much more attractive, and that is when we invested. Our decision wasn't driven by popularity or headlines. It was driven by the conviction in the technology and the infrastructure that SpaceX is building. When most people think about SpaceX, they think about rockets. We think about the logistics. If the next generation of computing eventually expands beyond Earth, whether that's orbital manufacturing, communications infrastructure, or even space-based data centers, someone has to transport thousands of tons of equipment into orbit. Servers, power systems, cooling technology, communications hardware, and replacement components, they all somehow have to get there. Well, SpaceX is building the transportation network that could make those possibilities economically viable. Just as railroads, highways, and shipping lanes created enormous economic opportunity on Earth, launch capability could become the critical infrastructure for the next frontier. Now, we don't know exactly what industries will emerge over the next 20 to 30 years, but what we do know is that if humanity begins building large-scale infrastructure in space, the companies capable of reliably and inexpensively delivering hardware into the orbit will occupy a uniquely valuable position. And that's the future that we're investing in, not today's excitement, but tomorrow's infrastructure. As you know, our portfolios are constantly adapting to whatever's going on in the world, whether it's wars, whether it's things that are happening in the developed countries, the underdeveloped countries, and the U.S., whatever it may be. Our portfolios, we're constantly making heading changes so that we can hopefully try to make the most of what's going on in the world and do the best job that we can for you, our client. If you have any questions about your specific situation, your specific portfolio, and how this relates to you as an individual, for you and your family, please give us a call. We're always available, as you know. But in the meantime, thank you for listening. Have a great day, and we'll be talking to you soon.